Okay, here we are heading into the first presentation for this room for the morning. It is my pleasure to welcome, on behalf of Anthea Harris, Geraldine Anderson. Anthea is unfortunately unwell, so Geraldine will be showing you the presentation on her behalf today. Anthea's career has ranged from geoscience to local history. In retirement, she's happy going down research rabbit holes, pursuing questions that have not been answered and pique her interest. She's currently the president of the City of Perth Historical Society and presenting Snuggling and Cuddling in Northam, a few days without the gumnut babies. Please welcome on her behalf, Geraldine Anderson.
Thank you. So Anthea's president of South Perth Historical Society. So I was meant to be driving Anthea up here, and Anthea rang me to tell me that she was sick and I couldn't drive her, and also that I was doing the presentation. And she emailed me this page and this page, so you can see most of it was going to be in her head. So think of me as a chauffeur who's been eavesdropping for years, and I'll do my best for you. So the title, Snuggling and Cuddling in Northam, this really is a talk about May Gibbs and her husband, J.O. Kelly, and I'll talk a bit about their childhood, how they came together, Northam, and their life after that. So let's begin. So May Gibbs and J.O. Kelly were married for a long time. He was 10 years older than her. He died 30 years before her. And according to her and what was written, they had a successful marriage, but they're an unlikely couple. So we'll talk about the beginning of their lives. In case people don't know who May Gibbs is, you probably all do, but here's a photo of one of her paintings. She was called the mother of the gumnut babies, and to her they were babies, not fairies. I think when I was a child I thought of them as fairies, but they were considered to be people, babies. And so they talk about a lot of things that are written about her, talk about her being the mother of the babies. And she didn't have any children, so perhaps they were like her children. So May Gibbs was born in England. She moved to South Australia when she was 4. Her parents were farming with her uncle, so 2 families. They stayed there for a couple of years, not terribly successful. They then moved to Perth. Both her parents were accomplished artists, particularly her father, and she was encouraged to paint. She grew up on the farm, then she moved to Claremont for a year, the city for a year, and then to South Perth. So she lived in South Perth from when she was 10 until she moved to Sydney when she was 38. And South Perth was bush then, so they moved there before the pub was built, before the post office, before South Perth Primary. The pub was built in 1898, so they moved there before there. It was bush. So she spent a lot of time in the bush, a lot of time just wandering around looking at the flora and fauna, and she really became a naturalist. So she was I didn't realise this when I was a child when I read the books. I grew up in Melbourne, but all the animals, all the flora and fauna in the books was all West Australian. So it was based on what she'd observed as a child and as she grew older. So this is an example of her work. Humans, please be kind to all bush creatures and don't pull out flowers. So the beginning of an environment, being an environmentalist, really. This is later on in life, but the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, New South Wales, she did the artwork for that, so she was really into that. But she lived in South Perth. She was educated by her mother when she was younger. She then caught the ferry across to school in the city, and she actually was given an education there. It was a girls' school, and she was taught history, languages, English literature, and girls studied there to the age of 18, which was unusual then. And the woman that ran that school was well thought of, so it must have been a reasonably good school. So it was unusual that she was educated till she was older, and also that her parents valued education for girls. She had one brother who figures largely in her life, and he did have children, so that's where the Gibbs in Perth come from. So she was an accomplished artist. She was employed as a commercial artist, and this is an example of some of her work, and it's relevant when we're talking about a marriage because she's describing, I don't know if you can see it from back there, but it's looking at different stages of courting and relationships. This was done in 1913. She got married in 1919, so a few years before she got married. And it's talking about the different stages. She got married when she was 40, which is quite old for a woman of that time, so she must have been considered to be on the shelf. Sorry, how do I go back the red arrow? Yeah, thanks. So this was the one from the bottom, and it says, "Lovely chops, love. Nice chops, love. At 40 she marries." So it was done quite 5 years or so before she got married, but whether she was thinking that would be a good age to get married, I don't know, but it was interesting that that's when it happened. So this is not one of her paintings, but Anthea put it in because it gives you an idea of what South Perth was like when she was a child. So this, we think, is actually down where the ferry is now, and we think that this is Men's Street. So it was just bush and beach and good times, I think, for children. Now, she grew up in Suburban Road, which is now called Mill Point Road. And if you picture Men's Street and the Windsor Hotel on the corner and the petrol station on the other corner, and if you're looking towards the bridge, the next street down is this one, is Harper. So Men's Street would be over here. She grew up in this house here, 96 Suburban Road. It's a duplex. If you go into our museum and you go to the back room, there's a large poster which is a print of a painting her father did of the house, and the house looks really impressive because it's painted from Harper Road, and you don't realise that it's a duplex. So I said to Anthea, did they own this house or not? And she doesn't know. She's done a lot of research, particularly about J.O., but she hasn't been able to find out whether they owned it or rented it. And the reason that I asked that is because the father was an accomplished artist. He and the woman who owned the mill started the West Australian Art Society, which is still going. It had a different name then, but that's what it's called now. West Australian Artists Association, I think. But they used to entertain. They were right into the social scene of Perth, but they were I can't remember who gave the talk last night about the classes of people. He was a clerk. He worked for the government, so they weren't socially in the upper echelons of Perth, but they mixed with those people. So they were, probably because they were so artistic, they were thought as being interesting, and possibly they were social climbers. Now, the person who lived in this house, which to me looks like it's got a larger footprint, So I asked Anthea, did he own the two houses or did they rent them, or did her parents own both of them? Because there's talk that Kalakini was their tenant, but I'm not sure about that. He might have even owned it. This man becomes important later in the story, but he was head of the mines department in Perth. So he had a good job, probably a better job than the father. So I don't know how that worked with the property. And apparently Anthea and Lynn, a lot of you would know Lynn, they haven't been able to find out about that. But we need to remember Kalakini because he becomes important later in the story. So this is a photo from Harper Street looking at the house. The house has been pulled down. There's a high rise there now, of course. Progress, unfortunately. But it wasn't nearly as big a house as what it looks like when you come into the museum and have a look. This is a photo of May sitting in the garden with her cat. And there's a black animal here, which I thought was a cat from the tail, but Anthea thinks that it's a Scotty dog, and I'll talk about the Scotty dogs later. So it's another animal. Let's think that it's a Scotty dog because it fits with the story. Also, it looks to me like she's older here, so she did move and then did come back to Perth for visits. So the other thing we need to think about May was that she was Church of England. It's just an aside, but I think it's relevant to the story. So May published Snugglepot and Cuddlepie in 1918. This is incorrect. It's a typo, but Anthea took it from another source. She sold 14,000 copies, 14,400, not 1,441. So 14,000 copies of that book. The population of Australia in 1918 was roughly 5,000. Her publisher was Angus and Robertson. Norman Lindsay also used Angus and Robertson, and his book, The Magic Pudding, which we're probably familiar with, was published later in the same year and sold 3,000 copies. So she was a big hit at the time. I thought about it and I thought possibly she actually published two books before that, one in the UK when she was at art school and one here. And it was also about the bush babies and it wasn't a success. So maybe this one was better art, better written, but it was coming to the end of the war, and it was when Australians started to have a nationalist approach to our country, and possibly that was published at the right time to make it more successful. So May stayed in Perth, finished her education, worked as a commercial artist, went to England to art school 3 times in her 20s, came back, then when she was 38, so she was in Perth until then, she moved to Sydney. And she moved with a friend called Reen, a woman who she'd met in England, who came back from England with her. So May and Reen lived together in Sydney, and they were extremely close friends Reen died before May, but for their entire life. So whenever May had issues or upset, Reen would come to her and spend long periods of time with her. So it was an extremely close friendship. Now we get on to May's husband. So his name was, I have to check that I don't say it incorrectly. His name was Bertrand James Ossoli Kelly. He called himself O.J. Kelly. He was born in Ireland, so May was born in England. He was Catholic. He was educated in Ireland for primary school by the Jesuits. He went to secondary school in England. Oh my God, I'll have to be quick. He went to secondary school in England. He worked. He came out to Australia. He lived in South Australia. Moved. He worked on the gold fields. I'll skip that one. He was at Nullakine for 7 years, running the battery. He liked classical music, and he used to have concerts for the Wongai people. I'm not sure what they thought of that. And eventually, the man who lived next door to May introduced them, and her father met him first and said to May that she should marry him. And May came back from Sydney and met him, and they got married. Now, the Northam connection is they came to Northam for 3 days for their honeymoon. Anthea's not been able to find out anything about that. Can't find out what hotel it is. Presumably they came because there was a train. What they did, no idea. So that's something that maybe Northam Historical Society could look into and put a plaque up somewhere. They then lived in Sydney with Reen, and it's reported another woman, Rachel, who came out from England. The mother worked out that J.O. didn't have any money, and he'd been probably conning them because he had the gift of the gab, I think. She got them to buy in Neutral Bay and build a house, which they lived at. He was her manager, which was unusual because it was unusual for a man not to work. And he did the colouring for her on her prints. They made a lot of money out of Snugglepot and Cuddlepie, and by the time the Depression came, they didn't have any money. And then she was doing cartoons for newspapers. She was paid 1/8 of what the artist who did Ginger Meggs was paid because she was a woman. So during the Depression, she lost the business for the cartoons because they cut them right back and then cut them out. Supposedly, J.O. had told the family that he was going to run the business, but I've read things to say that Angus and Roberts found her quite difficult to deal with. So I think she was doing a lot of the negotiating as well. They lived together until he died. She worked at night. He slept at night. Reen eventually got married and moved elsewhere, but kept coming back. This was their house, so she had her studio at their house. This was a photo Anthea put in because she thought it looks a bit saucy, so she figured that they must have got on okay. She didn't have children. She left all her work to her niece. It's now in the North Sydney Library. Anthea spent a lot of time over there. There's a memorial to her at the cemetery, but they don't have a plaque because their ashes were spread. Their wedding wasn't announced in the paper. They didn't have wedding notices. They didn't have death notices. They weren't religious, so the religion wasn't an issue, which is unusual for that time because I know that there was a great divide between Protestants and Catholics. She didn't talk about him after he died. The gardener didn't want to come the next day, and she said, "Don't be silly, come. There's no reason not to come." So they lived probably differently to a lot of people of that era. And this is a memorial to her at the cemetery because people were asking about her, and so there was nothing, and then the cemetery thought they should put something there because so many people were coming and asking about her. So, and this is a photo. He was into hunting, fishing, shooting, and she was into preserving animals. So she used to go fishing with him. So there was a bit of compromise there. He had an amazingly close relationship with her father, and used to write to him every day, every second day. Anthea's read the letters, and in those letters he'd put comments about her, like she was spending too much money. He was a gambler and drank. He had gambling debts that one of them took 7 years for him to pay back. She was the breadwinner in the family, so it was a really unusual relationship. But according to May, there's a tape of her speaking when she was 88. She said they had a very happy marriage, so it worked for them. But it all started in Northam, because that would have been the first time that they were alone together. If there's any questions, I don't know if I'll be able to answer them, but I can get an email and refer them to Anthea.
Thank you so much, Geraldine. And I think you've done Anthea very proud. Do we have any questions from the floor? There's none come through on the platform. I've got a question.
Oh, no, have you?
Yeah, but I'm going to go second. I'll pass the mic.
Thanks for stepping in. That was really good. Doing that on the hop, it was actually really good to get that information out. I was just wondering, with all of that, there's actually like a May Gibbs thing down at Harvey.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. And did she actually live down there at that time as well? Because that's beautiful, that whole Harvey thing.
They were in South Australia farming, and that didn't work for them. They came over to Harvey, the two brothers. So May's father and her uncle. So those two families. The men came out to Australia before before May's family. So May and her mother came out on the boat, and then the mother had her brother just before they arrived in Adelaide. So then they left there and went to Harvey, and they farmed at Harvey for 2 years, and then they came to Perth. And the father was an artist and a clerk, not really a farmer, so it didn't work for them. But the brothers stayed there.
Thanks, Geraldine. Are there any other questions from the floor? Who's got a May Gibbs book? How cool is that? I think the one I've got, I remember from my childhood, was probably my mum's from her child, which might have been maybe an original copy from her mum, my gran.
It's never been out of press, so it's been a very successful book. But I'm sure she didn't earn as much as Norman Lindsay.
Yeah. And what a great advocate for land care and wild animal care.
Yeah.
I remember getting that message and reading the books as a kid. And my mum her mum, my gran, are avid gardeners, and I wonder how much influence these books were to those, ways.
Even the Spanish flu, she did the advertising for that, and she had a gum nut baby with a gum leaf across its face to encourage people to wear masks.
Oh, I love that.
That was the year before.
Yeah, what a naturalist. Beautiful. Are there any other questions from the floor? Yes? We've got him going now.
You say he worked in Nullakine.
Yeah, Nullakine.
Where is that?
Oh, sorry, it's in the goldfields, so it's up near Leonora and Laverton. Anthea actually went up there and had a look, and she presented about him at a mining conference up there last year or the year before. Yeah. So it was one of the quieter batteries, apparently. So he spent his time reading and playing music, and perhaps trying to educate the miners and the Wongai people. I don't know. It was because he was so passionate about. Apparently, he used to play Nellie Melba. I don't know if it was because he was passionate about it and thought everyone else should be, or he thought that they were ignorant and never should be educated. I don't know.
Any other questions from the floor? Yes.
Hey, thanks for your presentation. It was super informative. I'm just wondering if we know anything about May Gibbs and her involvement with the New Guard in New South Wales in the 1930s. It was a weird sort of like fascist paramilitary. This one guy who was a member of cut the ribbon on the Sydney Harbour Bridge by himself using his like military sabre. And I was just wondering if there's been any sort of research into that.
Was she
Link like
involved with
this.
it?
I think she knew him loosely. I don't think she was involved with it, but I think they were in sort of an extended
Same.
social circle.
Yeah. Well, I don't know anything about that, but I have read that their house, Nutcote, was a very social house and that they had a lot of people over. He had very strong political views and used to argue with Reen. And what I've read is that it was like an intellectuals centre, and that although I imagine him being quite sociable, apparently at those events he was quite quiet, and she was more of a reserved person, but at the event she liked kind of being the centre of attention and holding fort. That's what I've read. But Anthea tells me that some things I read aren't correct, so I don't know if that's correct or not.
Awesome, thank you.
But she was involved in the suffragette movement in England when she was at art school, so she's probably has some political interests.
An interesting life, no doubt.
Yeah.
Interesting people to have known back then too. Any other questions before we move on to the next presentation? Geraldine, thank you so much. Please put your hands together again for Geraldine Anderson on behalf of Anthea.